he talking about he'll do it live. It's the funniest shit you've ever seen.
God damn it!
God damn, we'll do it live. We'll do it live. Fucking, you're right, and I'll do it live. It's awesome.
What's that drilling in my ear?
Yeah. Lawrence O'Donnell. You're thinking Lawrence O'Donnell. All right, guys.
Oh, that was like, yeah.
That one was hilarious too, where Lawrence O'Donnell flips out for like 8 minutes. Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, this is Gordan Dimmack. Gordan Dimmack has his own show, covers British and American politics. And he sent me this awesome email explaining a little bit more about that particular amendment that I was talking about associated with Jeremy Corbyn, where I said Jeremy Corbyn's position is nonsensical. Now, just so we're clear, and just so everybody knows what I'm talking about, there was an article in The Guardian where it was giving, you could say, what Britain was putting out as its leaving papers. Like this is, these are the things that we're putting forth as amendments for kind of the Brexit negotiations. One of the amendments had to do with labor, the front bench of labor. And the way The Guardian wrote it, The Guardian made it, let's say The Guardian wrote it in a way, damn it, I closed it. But The Guardian essentially wrote it in a way that kind of made this position seem somewhat nonsensical, that they wanted things that the EU was going to outright, utterly, and completely reject. Now, Gordan, explain, in fact, let me pull up the sheet so I can explain to people what I was talking about at that time, so everybody knows what I'm talking about now, because other people may be like, dude, what the hell are you talking about? We have no idea what you mean. There was multiple amendments that were taking place. Where is it? Damn, I don't have it up. But there were multiple amendments that were taking place. One of the amendments, you know, and The Guardian was giving information on whether or not Labour was either going to support it or reject it. And this one specific case, they were making a case that the government was going to reject it. Labour was wanting access to the single market. They also wanted, in addition to access to the single market, they wanted, come on. Here we are. I just read it out and I'll just show it to the audience so they can see what I am talking about while I am talking about it. Share application window. Yes. And yes. And yes. And present to everybody. Yes. All right. So at the very bottom of this
article, Jamal,
right here, Labor Amendment, access to the internal market. An intended replacement to Amendment 51 on the EEA, it states that a negotiated objective should be to ensure that the United Kingdom has full access to the internal market of the European Union, underpinned by shared institutions and regulations with no impediments to trade and common rights, shared protections as a minimum. Now, I said this was nonsensical because there was no way that the European Union was going to do this. This is not a pick and choose thing. The European Union is not going to allow them to take a little bit of this and not have some of the stuff that they want. Now, Gordan, what am I getting wrong about this particular assessment of events?
Scroll up to where it says Amendment 51. There you go.
Amendment 51. Where are we?
There you go. Gone past it again.
I went past it. Oh, right here. The EEA.
Yeah.
Obliges the government to prioritize staying in the European Economic Area known as the Norway option. Okay.
That's basically what Labour are proposing. What they're trying to do is they're trying to get a confirmation that we are going to stay in the single market. We are going to stay with free movement of people, free movement of goods, and basically we're going to have the same sort of deal with the EU as Norway. That's what Labour want.
But
now at the bottom there, the Labour amendment, and it was actually a different article. I think you may have talked about.
No, it's the same article.
Yesterday. Oh, it is. But at the bottom, that's where it's confusing because it's saying an intended replacement for Article 51. What the replacement is okay. So if you won't confirm that we're going to stop in the EU and we're still going to have free movement of goods and people, we still want some sort of promise that we are going to have some sort of partnership with the EU. That's pretty much all it is as far as I can see. I've read into it probably half a dozen times yesterday when all the details came out. And it was really confusing. And it's also really confusing the way the Guardian framed it as well, because what Labour are asking for there is not something that is against EU rules. And yes, it is cherry picking a little bit, but what they're saying is we at least want some sort of commitment that we will stay in the single market. That,
but if
as I read it, that's what they want.
But if you stay in a single market, aren't you stuck with the rules of the European Union? I mean, even the Norway option doesn't stop a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, as far as I understand it, which means you're still back in the same situation of not having a solution to the border issue.
Yeah, absolutely. You're correct. We essentially have everything that we did have when we were in the EU. The only thing we don't have to abide by is the EU supreme law, which sort of overrides the UK law. So what we're doing is, when we leave the EU law, we're going to mass sort of copy paste those into our laws and then cherry pick and change all the ones that we don't like, such as, I mean, I suspect some of the rules on the fishery laws will be changed. And that's basically the Norway option. The problem with that is you leave the EU, you're essentially getting the best of no worlds, because you've left the EU. You still have to abide by all the rules with the EU. You've still got free movement of people. You've still got free movement of goods. You've still got all the problems that people complained about, which is why they voted for for Brexit.
That was my point. I mean, that's not Brexit. That's something else.
Exactly. But the thing is, Jamal, and this is why this whole thing is an absolute shit fest right from the very beginning, because the reason I became politically aware is because of the EU referendum. I had never voted up until 2016 in my life. Never even bothered with it. As far as I was concerned, none of them actually represented what I felt and what my values were. And whoever got in, they were just as bad as each other. It wasn't until the referendum came along when I thought, hold on a minute, this is serious. Because what happened is we had I think it was 6 or 8 weeks, I can't remember the exact time, where there was the debates. And after the first week, it might have been the first 12 hours, to be quite honest, I fully realised that you're not actually going to get any sense out of these politicians, no matter which side you listen to, because essentially what they did is they built something that is extremely complicated down to a series of sound bites and slogans, 350 million on the side of the bus. And then on the other hand, you've got the Chancellor saying, oh, well, if we leave, then the seas will rise and the mountains are going to crumble and the volcanoes are going to roar and it's going to be the end of the world. So I was an internet marketer at the time. So I thought I knew a lot of people who were doing marketing in political groups on Facebook. This is how I know Rachel Maddow was full of shit when she was talking about the trolls, because I knew people that were being outed as Russian bots. I knew them personally, and I knew that they had 2,000 bot accounts of their own. Anyway, so I was an internet marketer, and I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend my time, because the internet marketing was pretty easy at the time. I thought I'm going to spend a lot of my time researching this so I can get the facts and actually inform the people around me, because they were as confused as I was. And within about 2 days, 3 things came to my mind. And this is, nobody had explained this in the debates. Nobody had talked about them. The first one is, this is a stupid referendum. You can't have an in-out referendum. If you're going to have a referendum, it needs to be in, and then you need to define what out is. You can't just say in, or we'll go and do something else. Because what is that something else going to be? People are voting on something that they don't know about. Some people will want a soft Brexit. Some people want a hard Brexit. Some people want to pull up the anchor on the UK, put the feet over the side and paddle as far away to the North Pole as possible.
It's funny. I remember doing it, and they asked Theresa May, what does Brexit means? And they kept saying, Brexit means Brexit. And it was like, what? What? Brexit means Brexit. And you see the fuck fest that's taking place now, where the guy, David Davis, was talking about resigning multiple times. You had Boris Johnson, who's bashing his prime minister openly, talking about the woman should be more like Trump. She's too weak to sack him. I mean, the DUP literally can leave at any point. And if the DUP leaves because it doesn't like what Theresa May is doing, the government will collapse. This is not necessarily a show of confidence, to say the least.
Yeah, you could say that. The second thing I realised, so the first thing was this is a stupid referendum. The second thing I realised is what they were talking about more on the Leave side was the Norway option, which is Amendment 51.
Yeah.
They constantly talked about it, constantly. And a lot of people voted for Leave based on that option. And now the government don't want that option. They want the hard Brexit, the closed borders, and how they're going to overcome the problem, which is the third thing that I realised, of the Northern Ireland peace treaty, is beyond me.
That blew me away. So right there, Boris Johnson, when he was given his diatribe, he acted as if this wasn't an issue at all. This seems to be a big deal to me. And can you explain that to the public? I mean, I've explained it before, but you're talking about it. So there may be somebody who's looking at the video who doesn't fully understand the difference between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. But could you give a basic explanation of the problem associated with that particular point?
The IRA didn't like being under the rule of the United Kingdom. And to be quite honest, I don't blame them, because essentially we're occupying Northern Ireland. Essentially, that's what it is. Now, I'm not an expert on this, Jamal, but what I do know is growing up, there was a lot of violence in Northern Ireland, and there was a lot of bombings in the UK as a result. I remember the Brighton bombings, the Manchester bombings, there were a lot of them. So it's probably why we can handle terrorist attacks over here a hell of a lot better than you could in America. Your press in America just can't understand the fact that we've gone through this for 30, 40 years. We're match fit when it comes to terrorist attacks. Now, throughout all of this, there was one guy who wanted to open dialogue with the IRA or their political party, Sinn Féin, to bring them to the table and to try and come to some agreement. And the agreement that was made between them was the IRA said, right, okay, we'll stop bombing. We'll stop bombing and killing people and fighting back. What we need in return, we need no hard border between Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. Because if you look back at news cuttings, it was the checkpoints between Ireland and Republic of Ireland were a huge target for the IRA. There were lots of bombings of the checkpoints. And the deal was, right, okay, we'll do that. We will have our own, political party in Northern Ireland and our own government and that sort of thing. And we'll never take any seats that we win in the UK Parliament in Westminster. And that essentially was the deal. It was a very simple deal. It's one of the very few good things that Tony Blair presided over. And at that point, I thought, well, Tony Blair's excellent. I mean, he's come in and
Good Friday Agreement.
Yeah, that is the Good Friday Agreement, essentially what it is. Now, that first stipulation, or that main stipulation in it, no border between Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, it's huge. You don't want to mess about with that, because nobody wants to go back to the scenes. I remember the scenes, Jamal. They were horrific. They were horrific. Nobody wants to mess about with that. And time again, Sinn Féin and the DUP have warned the UK, don't mess about with that border, because if you do, you are playing with fire. And the only way to have a hard Brexit is to put a border somewhere. You have to have some. And Theresa May, was it 2 weeks ago, she put forward two separate proposals, and I evaluated them and basically in a video, and I said, listen, both of these proposals are nonsense. Neither of them can work. Yeah,
they're fantasy. They don't even have to.
One of them was based on technology that doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. And Rees-Mogg is being real smug about this. There's an awesome clip that I did where Rees-Mogg is being confronted with somebody who has he's a small business that has.
Was that on the radio show?
Yes. Yeah, I saw it. And Rees-Mogg has no answer to this guy. Like, no answer. And the guy is just I love the way the guy did it. The guy just asked him a basic question, and then he plows into Rees-Mogg's answer. And Rees-Mogg eventually ends up with, I think you're overplaying this. No, he's not overplaying it. You just don't have an answer to what this guy's saying.
Well, the trouble with Jacob Rees-Mogg is, and for the American audience that don't know him, you had the B-note, didn't you, growing up?
You said the B-note?
The B-note, the comic book, the B-note.
No, I didn't actually. I don't know.
I don't know what that was a UK thing. Anyway, there was a character in it called Lord Snooty. And that is basically Jacob Rees-Mogg. If you imagine a tall, lanky piece of piss with a top hat and a monocle with all the values and the views of the Old Testament, that's basically what Jacob Rees-Mogg is. And he's so far detached from real people.
Yes, he is.
He has no idea of the ramifications of what he's suggesting. Because if we leave without a deal, which is essentially the only way we can get what the Brexiteers want, is to leave and say, that's it, which is your argument. That's a fair argument. That's a fair point. We can't have a soft Brexit because that's not what people voted on. We still haven't left.
You're stuck.
You know?
I mean, it's like, how do you... I guess I looked at the Jeremy Corbyn thing and I was like, this is not Brexit. Like, even if you're calling it a soft Brexit, you haven't really left the EU. If your rules and regulations, for the most part, have aligned so closely with the European Parliament, and you have this other side thing where that Theresa May, I don't particularly like her, but on this point, I think she's right. But she kind of makes this point, you're going to be stuck with European rules without having a seat at the table to make those rules. So if Europe decides they want to have some kind of deal, let's say the TTIP or something to that effect, you're stuck with it because either you meld your rules with whatever the single market is, or you go your own way, in which case you're going to lose access to the single market anyway.
And to even further complicate the issue, what we just described and what we just said was, hey, that's not Brexit. We're not leaving. Yeah. Millions of people actually voted for that very specific thing. Millions voted leave, expecting that that was going to be the case because that is the Norway model.
But that doesn't stop. That's not Brexit. I mean, like I guess what I'm saying is you still lose control of your borders, meaning you don't have control of your borders.
Yeah.
You still can't control essentially your own regulations. Say for the moment, if the UK says, or the Britain or the European Union says, we don't like GMO foods anymore. We don't like this. We think it causes cancer. We think it causes some kind of medical issue.
Oh, yes, we can. Yes,
and the UK,
that's not true. We can say no. That's one of the beauties about leaving the EU, because like I say, the EU Supreme Law, those will be basically copy and pasted into the UK common law, but EU law would basically no longer exist if we left. We're still part of the partnership with the EU, the same as Norway are. This is what Norway, this is the Norway model.
Wait,
Norway didn't.
Real quick, but if that was true, you wouldn't be able to sell those markets into the single market.
No, that's the case. I see your point.
I'm making this point that you can stay associated with the single market for as long as the rules and regulations of Britain are essentially tethered to that single market. Is that true? Is that fair?
No. For instance, so let's say I don't know. Let's say the EU said, right, okay, Bovril causes cancer. To Bovril is like a meat paste we have over there. It's disgusting. I don't have it. But say the EU said, we're not going to import Bovril anymore because it causes cancer. It's against our rules. Okay. Because we're outside the EU, we could still import it if we wanted to. Norway could. Switzerland could. All of these countries would have access to the single market, but it's the laws. We would be in control. One of the reasons
you
Norway
just couldn't produce it and make it and sell it to the EU.
No, we couldn't do that. But then nobody could because that's their rule.
So wait, just real quick. You can't even. So if you're part of the single market, you can't even import something into Britain that the EU doesn't like.
I would have to check on that, but as I see it, yeah, I think that's the case.
Wow.
If it's against EU law, EU is supreme law in the UK if we're part of the EU and every other country in the EU.
Wow. I did not know you were giving up your sovereignty to that degree.
Yeah, that's why we have the EU Supreme Court, the same as you have the Supreme Court in the US.
I knew that you couldn't sell it to the single market. Like I knew it's like you could necessarily sell the product. If somebody made it in Britain, they couldn't sell it in the single market to somebody else. I didn't realize you couldn't even import it into Britain itself.
Yeah, and there are other rules with regards to the fishing laws, for instance. It's something like 200 nautical miles around Great Britain that we control. However, because we're part of the EU, basically any Spanish trawler, French trawler, Portuguese trawler can come into our waters, into the North Sea, and heavily fish it, take all that fish back home, and basically not have to pay any tax on it to us at all, even though they've come into our waters and fished for our stuff. Now, Norway has a huge fishing economy, massive. It's in the North Sea. And that is one of the reasons why they didn't want to be in the EU, because they wanted control around their own fishing territory. We would be able to take that back. I mean, we would then be able to discard some of the ridiculous laws that the EU have with regards to fisheries. For instance, they have this law when trawlers are out in the sea, if they catch cod, for instance, that's too small to go on the dinner plate, it's too small to sell, they have to kill it rather than throw it back.
What?
I know. It's an EU law, Jamal. I don't understand it either. And
That's
I've
utterly
looked at
bizarre.
this several times, and that's the way the law is.
They have to murder it as opposed to back into the water.
Yes, which just shows you how, there are certain EU laws that are pathetically stupid, but they are ramped up and overblown by our press, sort of like, oh, we can't even sell bananas that are too bendy now, or we can't even sell cucumbers that aren't straight. The Daily Mail are great at this sort of thing, at creating hysteria, which obviously helps with, helps create bigotry and racism towards people coming into the country.
Wow. That's amazing. Man, that's like, I knew there were weirdness, or there was weirdness associated with some of the laws of the EU, especially around the fishing waters. I did not realize it was that strange. Nor did I realize you guys had lost sovereignty to that degree.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why people vote. I mean, I'll be honest. When I was doing all this research, and I researched it so much, and I changed my mind depending on what article I read that day. There was the reason I voted Remain in the end was because the last day, on the morning, I didn't know which way I was going to vote, and the article I read was how much we got in subsidies from the science community within the EU for projects like Manchester and our astronomy and science projects. We get a massive amount of money in subsidies from the EU in return. It's not just 350 billion going one way and nothing coming in return. It's more complicated than Boris Johnson put it on the side of his double-decker bus, but it's Boris Johnson. What do you expect? He's a blithering idiot.
Yeah.
And I ended up voting Remain just based on that. But since then, since I've become, that was sort of the catalyst for me to become more politically aware. It was around the time that Hillary Clinton had just bought the Democratic nomination.
They're taking her to the federal court over this. Man, they don't know if they're taking her. There's been a complaint filed. I don't know if anything may come of it, but there's like a federal complaint filed kind of making this point that this woman laundered $84 billion. It's a story that I did like a year ago that they're just now getting around to it.
I think HA did it in about 2015.
HA has been doing it for 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018.
And CNN and Fox are just coming out and saying breaking news. It's like, dude, what? Did you? What was the one that Lee Camp did? Oh, the Cambridge Analytica thing. He was talking about that literally 14 months ago. Yeah. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, it's breaking news. Cambridge Analytica, 2 months ago, breaking news. Cambridge Analytica interfered in the election. I thought, this isn't breaking news. No, I heard Lee Camp talk about this a year ago. What is the matter with you, you idiots?
Our news, I don't know what the news in Britain, but the news in America is very specific to the perspective of America, with a heavy bias towards the political class. They miss a lot, to say the least. They miss a lot. And so it's like, for them, is for example, Donna Brazile comes out saying Hillary Clinton rigged the election. And everybody was like, oh my God, it seems like Hillary Clinton might have rigged the election. And you can imagine, like, the Bernie supporters are looking at this, are like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
When I just became politically aware around that time, I was obviously an internet marketer. And I thought, well, I kind of like doing this. I kind of like, getting informed about politics. This is really interesting. So I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to join a lot of the groups on Facebook and start listening to people and listening to what they're saying. And I started joining Bernie Sanders. I knew nothing about Bernie Sanders. I wanted Clinton to win, before the EU. I knew nothing, Jamal.
Wow. Let me ask you this: the Corbyn and May, when this is weird to me because I look at it as, let me ask you this: the left wing argument for leaving. I've heard George Galloway make this argument. I think he called it Tony Benn's argument. Essentially, this thing of they saw Greece and they figured they were not going to be able to implement the plan that they wanted to while they were associated with the EU. I guess I'm kind of curious about what is the feeling of a person who's there now. I know people are trying to reenact the stay campaign and all this other stuff. Does that have any legs? And if they had a referendum today, what do you think the result of that referendum would be? Or do you think it'd just be another split election?
This is my. I'll give you what the way things are, and then I'll give you my opinion on it.
Okay.
Which is sort of the way I do my videos as well, and I know you do the same thing. If there was another referendum today, we would for sure vote Remain. So many people have changed their mind just because when they voted Leave, they didn't understand what they were voting. You've seen. Do you remember the reaction from the crowd when Hillary lost in 2016? You remember the reaction. You looked at that crowd and you saw people who didn't have a fucking clue what was going on. They didn't know what they were voting for. They didn't know how bad her policies would have been for them. This is the same in this country with regards to the EU referendum. People didn't know. It was a populist vote. You had maybe 5%, 10% of the country who was inherently racist, who just didn't like anybody with black or brown skin. Okay, you get that in every country. Then you have 5 or 10% of people who just don't want all these Eastern Europeans coming in. I heard there was one brilliant, you may remember this, Gordon Brown was caught on his microphone when he was Prime Minister. He was caught on microphone and he was talking to a woman in Scotland and he left his mic on and he said that I wish people would stop introducing me to these bigoted women, because the question that she asked him was, these Eastern Europeans, where are they coming from? And I sat there and thought, well, Eastern Europe.
Yeah, Eastern Europe.
So you've got a section of people. You've got a section of people that, you know, they just don't like foreigners. It's as simple as that. And then you've got maybe another 20 or 30% of people that were the people who voted Remain. And that was just a giant, you're all telling me to stop. You're doing nothing for me. It's an FU to the establishment. Mark Blythe is 100% right. It was populism that won it over. But now people are starting to see the ramifications. And now people are starting to see what I saw when I was doing the research, that nobody on the TV or none of the pundits, none of the politicians was actually saying. This is a stupid referendum. You have to define what out means before you vote. And one of the other things I said to, I remember my neighbor saying, she called me a Judas.
What? Why did he call you a Judas? Oh, because you were voting.
She was joking. It wasn't serious. But she said, you're a Judas. I knew you'd vote Remain. I'm like, you've got to understand something. This is not going to be the last referendum. And I said that to her the day of the referendum. I said, this is not, there is going to be another referendum. She says, what, another referendum for us to stay or leave? I said, no. If we do vote leave, well, we voted leave by then. I said, because we voted leave, there is going to be another referendum down the line. What type of leave do you want? That's the referendum that I think people would get on board with, because then democracy is actually working. But at the moment, we've voted out. A lot of people voted out thinking they were going to get one thing. A lot of people voted out thinking they were going to get another. And right now, the people who are choosing are the very people who will screw over those people who were voting at the drop of a hat to get what they want. And that's more power and more corporate money. The second referendum, I'm fine with it as long as it's what type of Brexit do you want, not an in-out referendum. That's personally my opinion. And I said at the time, there will be other referenda. I said there will be at least another one referendum, maybe two.
Wow. If that's true, I mean, I always think referendums are a show of democracy. And if you have a referendum, you're stuck with the things of the referendum. I chafe at the idea, even if people didn't fully understand what they were voting for, they voted. Meaning, now the question becomes, like you said, what is that referendum going to be at the end? And if that referendum is going to be, what kind of Brexit do you want? I am curious to see if you're right about that. Like, I'm curious to see if they actually can have the political will to have something like that take place.
Me too.
I am skeptical, but I don't live there. I don't know if there's a political will for it. Let me ask you this. Is there a political will to bring something like that? Because I know there's certain parts of the left, the Blairites are pushing, what is it, Alistair Campbell, those types are trying to push for this idea of a second referendum. They've ended up on this kind of political marketing type thing of, well, look, we understand that we lost, but we think the people need to get a vote on the final deal. And they know goddamn well that the reason they're telling people they need to get a vote on the final deal is because that's their political end on trying to stave off Brexit. This is just a political maneuver in order to try to not allow this to go through. Do you think the political will exists for that? And have the people in Britain started to freak out to such a degree where something like that will be possible?
Well, people have started seeing the ramifications of Brexit. Although we haven't left, people are starting to see, hold on a minute, things are more expensive. You know, coffee, for instance, has gone up 25%.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Joe and Nescafe has gone up about 20-25% because of the value of the pound. We have to import all our cocoa. You know, the pound is 20% less strong than it was before the referendum. Now it's, you know, so people have started to notice.
I didn't know it took a hit. I knew it went down.
Great for me, Jamal. I got paid in dollars.
I know that part. No, I know
24% pay rise to me, you know. But for everybody else who gets paid in pounds, for anything that needs to be imported, you're pretty much 25, or rather, export. I can't remember which way it ran. I always get confused. But basically, it's 25%.
Items, you're paying more for the items that you're importing because against the pound, it's weaker.
Yeah,
I mean the pound is weaker. Wow, I had no idea. So you're telling me I need to take a trip to London because my dollar will go a long ways.
If you're going to take a trip to the UK again, I would say don't go to London. London is the arsehole of the UK, in my opinion. I mean, it is, Jamal. There's an old joke from a comedian called Jasper Carrot. And he said, obviously, you got the M25 motorway that circles London, that goes all the way around London. It circles it. It's the M25 circular. He said, London are that detached from the rest of the country, they might as well just turn the M25 into a fucking moat.
Is that bad?
Because they are so detached from everything else in the UK. And the thing is, the rest of the people and the places in the UK are so much better and nicer than London itself, and so much cheaper as well. London is extremely expensive compared to the rest of the country. There are places in up north in the Lake District, near the Scottish border. There are places down in the southwest in Newquay and Cornwall that are just the most beautiful places on the planet. There's so much to see and so much ancient history, castles and all that sort of thing in Wales. So if you do come to the UK, I would suggest just get out of London if you can, especially if you've been to London before.
Yeah. I've been crowned down. I went to see Wicked at one of the places in London. I thought the cabbies were pricks. But behind that, I loved it. Let me ask you this. So one of the things, I think it was Blumenthal, sent out this thing where 9 out of 10 of the poorest places in Europe were in the UK. Is that true?
Blumenthal did that. I haven't heard.
I thought it was Blumenthal. I could be wrong. It might have been Blumenthal, one of the other ones. But they were making this point that the people who essentially decided to leave were in some of the places that were the hardest hit by either austerity or the economic downfall.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't heard of it, but it wouldn't surprise me if that is true, because London is so expensive to live. You know, it's probably the rates of poverty, that sort of thing that he was talking about. It's so expensive to live, and you know, they're really trying desperately to just kick out people who are in, you know, council houses and council flats and high-rise council flats in London, and they're trying to increase their rents and trying to get them out in all nefarious ways because they want to knock them down and put up nice, pretty buildings for rich people rich Russians to buy, basically.
They're doing that in New York. They're doing that in California. California has a homeless population that has exploded. But
I read about that. Was it 83,000 homeless or something like that? And you've got 59 billionaires.
Yeah,
59 billionaires.
think about that.
One of those billionaires could end like, homelessness in California forever, and it not even touch his bottom line. He wouldn't even notice it.
And they're looking at it like, they're like, hey, it's kind of odd that we have all these billionaires and all these homeless people. It's like they don't make the comparison of saying the fact that this guy's a billionaire to some degree is related to the fact that these people are living on the streets. And you know, I had a plutocrat tell me, the guy who I work with, he said, you know, I don't think there's any issue with income inequality. I think it's perfectly okay for me to make as much money as I can. Fuck everybody else. And I tried to make the point to him. You realize that the whole thing of you having a ton, money is not, you know, this infinite thing, that there needs to be some tether between people per se. And the fact that one person gets a huge amount to some degree has some effect on people not having enough. Like you making all this in cash is to some degree you not paying your workers a decent, fair wage. Those things are related. But in California, it's horrendous. New York, California, you get to certain areas. Richmond is not all that bad, but many of the big cities, horrendous. The same thing that's happening in London is the same thing that's happening to some degree in DC. I mean, I'm sorry, in New York and Los Angeles and big cities.
It's happening all over the world, and you know that's one of the problems with capitalism, because capitalism rewards those who are the most dishonest and the most aggressive, and the people who screw over the rest of the world as much as possible. It's one of the reasons why my business has failed, because I wouldn't screw people over. And other people used to screw me over on a regular basis, smile at me and sort of say, it's nothing personal, it's just business.
It's just business.
To those people I wanted to rip their heads off.
I love that slogan.
It's not personal to you, man. It's personal to me, though. That's what I used to think. And, you know, I sort of got out of that buying and selling industry pretty quick, because it was cutthroat. But, you know, essentially that's what capitalism and businesses are. The more they screw over people, look at Bezos. Look at what he's doing. He's the richest guy on the planet. And he won't even turn on the air conditioning. Because it's cheaper for him to hire ambulances and put them outside one of his factories when people start fainting from the heat. What sort of person does that?
But you know what? Here's the thing. I accept that there will be a certain number of people in the country, in the society, who are rich fucks, who are psychopaths, who are so unempathetic, they only care about their own. You've had enough wealth to get rid of poverty, I think, like 7 times over, some ridiculous amount.
Yeah.
And yet people think that, well, the plutocrats are these nice people and capitalism is fucking awesome and all this other stuff. Well, if it was this thing of life, liberty, and fraternity that people were saying it was, you wouldn't have the society that you have. And beyond that point, false consciousness. So it's one thing for Bezos or a few people, you know, the top 1% to allow or want, you know, if you ask somebody, hey, would you like to have $100 billion? Most people, or a lot of people say yes. Some people will say, fuck no, I don't want that much money because I don't need it. But if you tell them, look, your society not only will reward you with this and give you $130 billion, they would act as if you are just fucking awesome for having it, and that the things that you say are lollipops and sun and rainbows and the world is great. But what's about the rest of the population? Where's the 99%? Like, I understand, like in certain pre-Columbian societies, they would ostracize people who were, for the most part, selfish and, you know, these type of psychopaths. Our society rewards this behavior. Bezos, yes, he's a fucking asshole for having $130 billion. And he should look in the mirror in the morning and say, I'm a horrible person for having this much money, when he gets into his limo to go to his third house, stepping over the homeless guy to do it. But there's a certain false consciousness around the population that fights for people like Bezos, even though they barely have 2 dimes to rub together. Just an odd way, I put more blame on those people, even though I understand that they're within a societal structure, they grew up in a society and all this other stuff. So I
don't put the blame on them at all. No, I don't at all. They've been gaslighted by the media, Jamal. You know,
that's true.
I was one of them. I was just as dumb and ignorant as them. I was one of them.
And wait, and let me explain what I mean when I say blame. I don't mean this from a standpoint of I don't mean this from a standpoint of they have purely free will, and based on pure free will, they're making a choice to support the plutocrat in a system that kind of fucks them over. I don't mean it that way. I just mean it from the sense of there's a certain false consciousness that supports and props up this particular system, and they would fight to their dying breath for people like Bezos, not realizing that it's people like Bezos that's fucking them over. I don't necessarily like the fact that Bezos wakes up in the morning and tries to do whatever he can to make more billions while he's fucking over other people. By the same token, I get just as annoyed when you're having a conversation with somebody who's literally like a Trump supporter and who makes these arguments for Trump as if Trump is somehow fighting in their interests, when you're like, Trump is the same plutocrat fuck like the other plutocrat fucks that have been fucking you over, and you're supporting the guy who's doing it. I understand that you end up in a situation where these people feel like everyone else has let them down, and this guy seems somewhat different. I would argue the same thing was with Obama, this kind of hope and change stuff where people thought they were getting something different out of the process. So I don't, and maybe blame is the wrong word. Maybe I guess my heart goes out to it. I don't know the right word for it. Blame is the one that comes to mind, but it's this thing of like, it's like, dude, wake up. That's what it feels like. It's like, dude, wake up. It's like pulling on somebody's shirt, saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. And they're just kind of like, what do you mean, wake up? I'm perfectly conscious and aware. You're like, really no, you're not.
It's really frustrating, but it's the reason why you and I have a channel.
Frustrating, that's it. That's the word, frustrating. It's
utterly really frustrating because you really want to talk to these people, and it's not a case of let them see your side. It's almost like no, you need to actually. We need to agree on what the facts are first.
Yes.
And your version of the facts is just, it's totally wrong. And we need you. This is what I try to do, really. And I know you do it a lot in your videos as well. And whenever I make a mistake, damn, I'm so hard on myself because it's like, shit, but it's an honest mistake, you know? It's not like I'm trying to mislead people.
Yeah, I hate my fuck ups.
I try and get people to
I absolutely hate my fuck ups. Yeah, I hate my fuck ups.
But it's the reason we got it. So I understand. I don't understand other people who you know are independent media like us that still support Trump and everything he's doing, and I don't quite understand it. But you know, maybe they're working on a different version of the facts than I am.
I don't get it. I listened to Ron Falcone interviewed Anomaly. And I think Ron McClone called it debate with a Trump supporter. And I was going to do a video on it. And I thought, I can't do a video on this. I would come across as an asshole. Like, because he's so jumbled. Like, if that makes sense. Like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, talking about Anomaly. And he's so odd. And this stuff is like he has a mash of stuff in his head, but none of it logically makes sense. And so he comes out with this stuff that's a support for Trump, but he sounds like Paul Ryan, or he sounds like some of these other people. And Ron oftentimes had to kind of patiently try to explain to him, you don't know what you're talking about. And I don't think I would have been that patient, which is why I didn't do the video. I was gonna do the video live.
I don't think I could ever do a debate full stop. I really don't. With anybody who I have a I don't think I could sit down and have a conversation with them, no problem. For instance, I could sit down and have a conversation with H.A. Goodman, I am sure, on many things that we disagree on, and we could sit down and have an intelligent conversation. But when it comes to debates, when has a debate ever solved anything in the history of like ever?
Oh no! See, for me, debates are about winning. It's not about trying to get to the edge of things.
Maybe that's why I don't like them then. It's not a case for me, it's not a case of you making your point and you winning something. It's like, no, it's a case of we actually talk about something and really come to a conclusion and see things from perspectives that maybe we haven't seen facts from before. Then there are many stances that I have taken in life where then I've seen something and it's like, wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah,
I didn't like, for instance, the hunting in Africa. I mean, I am such an animal lover. I really am.
Yeah.
But the hunting in Africa, I'm actually starting to think this needs to be legalized, regulated, taxed, and this is what it needs to be done. Because for instance, they've got a park in Africa. Louis Theroux, I don't know whether you know who he is. He's a British journalist who does like documentaries. And he went out to Africa and he spoke to the people out there and the rangers. And the ranger looked at him, and Louis Theroux was coming from a place where I am an animal lover. How can you charge these tourists to come over and hunt your lions, which is essentially what he's doing. He's charging an exorbitant amount of money. And the guy was like, you don't understand. Africa is fucked. I'm sorry, very sorry about the accent. I wasn't trying to.
Oh, dude, you're fine. Man,
he's like, Africa is fucked. Without this,
try to do other like British accents or African accents, I'll fuck it up royally. Go for it. Do your best. Do your thing.
He said, you don't understand. We have this area now. We fence it off. We have the money coming in, and with that money coming in, we can then use that money and look at what. And he's got, you know, a sanctuary that's thriving with wild animals because of the hunting. The hunting has paid for it. And this is a massive, it's like 10,000 square miles or something like that they're doing. So that, to me, it's like, well, I've always been anti-hunting, but if that solves the hunting issue, then maybe, you know, I'm not saying I'm pro-hunting now, but that's the sort of thing where actually if you listen to the other side and you listen to facts from the other side that you're not aware of, then maybe you can make a more informed decision and come to an agreement on where to go forward. Whereas within debates, that never happens, ever.
Let me ask you this. So no, I agree with you. First, I agree with you on the debate thing. I don't like debates. I hate debates. I mean, if it depends on what it is. If I completely, utterly disagree with the other person's opinion, I'm okay with a debate because my goal is to just win. The guy who I had on last night. Can you
imagine debating Ben Shapiro? I'd want to rip his head off.
Right, that's what I mean.
I would want to launch myself over the stage and pummel the man into a small ball of plasticine.
But that's kind of my point. There's some people where it's like, yeah, I'm okay with that debate. There are others not so much. I
could debate you, Jim Yuga,
with HA, where we talked about the Israeli thing and we talked about it was something else. There were awesome conversations. Like it wasn't a debate. The thing I had on last night was just a debate. So I agree with you. But the other part, the hunting thing, let me ask you this. So if it's a solution to the problems in Africa, Africa is fucked. I love this. If a plutocrat said, look, if you had a pen where you let me, let's say, shoot a human being every so often, and we will pay more money in order to deal with healthcare and education, would that be okay?
Oh man, that's a real Ben Shapiro move. That is, you've just created the right false equivalence there.
I'm just asking because I understand the thing of, look, allowing them to hunt these animals to some degree helps our economy, and we can use part of that money to essentially help the other animals that are there. I get that argument completely. These animals will be in a worst case scenario, or Africa will be in a worst case scenario if it wasn't for these things.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, the animals in Africa are perfectly okay. The issue is not necessarily the animals, I don't think. The issue is
the issue is the profiteering from it. If there was a system. So the thing is, you know, these hunters, they go over to this place and they kill these lions. They have the pictures and maybe they take a memento, like, well, you know, claws or whatever they want to take. But then the lion goes and feeds a tribe. You know, so it's not like they've killed that lion and now, you know, I'm coming across as somebody who's pro hunter now, and I'm not.
No, I don't. I know. I understand.
There were always two sides to a story, and sometimes
you're making a nuanced position of saying it's not necessarily that I like the fact that they're murdering these animals.
Yeah,
it's more so I get that there's a positive benefit from the murdering of these animals.
It's not just a positive benefit either. It's multiple, and it's multiple that solve so many problems in Africa. Like I said, the guy's like, you don't understand. Africa is effed. It really is. And when I watched that documentary, it really opened my eyes to. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm still anti-hunting. I think the Trumps are absolutely disgusting going over there and killing elephants and all this sort of thing. But
right there. I mean, I think that's the part that gets me. It's like plutocrats who make the decision of, we have a ton of money, and instead of using this money for good ends, we're going to use this money to essentially, go somewhere else and murder other animals. The money is not necessarily going to be used for good. They could use that money for good ends. They don't use that money for good ends. They use it to exploit. And I understand this idea of, I understand what you mean. You're making a nuanced argument. You're not saying I love hunting. And so I don't want anybody to get this.
Yeah, the only reason I brought it up was like I just wanted to try and give an example of why debates don't work and why conversation does. Because if conversation does and you sit down and you talk about things that maybe the other person isn't aware of, then maybe you can come to some sort of agreement in the middle and move forward. Whereas debates, what happens is people dig their heels in, get more entrenched in their positions, and this is why I don't talk about people that your younger brother does, the Progressive Voice. By the way.
Oh, the knife! The knife is slid
Sorry,
in.
I've heard a few people joke about that with you, and I thought I'd put it in. But that guy is so woke; it's unbelievable. He's really good. Did you hear his debate with Carl Kalinske? He knows what to always interview. His younger brother, but he talks a lot about.
He debated somebody. Who did he debate?
No, he had a conversation with Carl Kalinske, didn't he? He was on the. He did like a 2-hour show.
Did. So I didn't see.
It was excellent. It was like, wow, this guy knows his shit, man. It's like, this is, I thought he was just somebody who trolls Ben Shapiro and Ann Coulter and Timmy Lasagna or whatever her name is. But that's all he talks about on his show. And now I would never do that, but it's good that he does it. I like that. I like that he does it. I like that somebody is just making a show off the fact that, exposing these people to be the hypocrites that they are, who would just get entrenched in their positions and are Republican.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. I knew Cal had an interview with him. I know he's tight with Cenk. I don't know much about him. Here's the thing. The funny part is I feel so bad about that. I
don't know how it all happened. All I know is that I've heard people talk on your show about it, and I thought I'd bring that up. I thought that'll make him laugh.
He's like a 16-year-old that I kind of did a hit video on, because he did a hit video on Katie Johnston and Jimmy Dore, both of which I consider to be friends of the show.
Katie Johnston and Jimmy Dore were like my heroes.
Right. And so I'm like, Katie Johnston's been on the show. Up to that point, Dore hadn't been on the show, but Dore was somebody who I really liked. And it's like, how are you sticking a knife in both of these people in this way? Now, Garnome kind of made this point. You put your gloves on, you're fair game. He put his gloves on, he got in the ring, he's fair game. But it did, after the video, I think it was like a day or so later, I was like, oh, he punched a kid.
No, you didn't.
Without a child.
If you go to his channel and you look at what he talks about, it's constant. It's Timmy Lasagna, it's Ben Shapiro, it's Jordan Peterson, it's all these that's he's talking about he's not talking about the policies, he's talking about other people. So his videos are all about getting clicks. That's all it is. It's getting clicks. Those things get a lot more views because people want that sort of thing rather than actual real news. This is why the TV just gives us so much shit and reality TV, because that's what people will watch. It's just watching
that's what people will watch, or is that what they just give them? I strongly suspect. I think this is the capitalistic thing at work.
It is the system that rather than one thing or another. That's what I was going to say to that.
Well, I think it's one of those things. It's kind of like burger joints, if that makes sense. Like you can serve really good, healthy food. And if everyone served really good, healthy food, then that would be the norm and that would be what people go to. The moment that somebody else serves candy, it's like, oh, we have candy here. You almost with this kind of capitalistic thing where you kind of incentivize others to kind of do the same. It's like a bargain basement, that Jeremy Corbyn talks about, this thing of tax thing. The moment that one of the countries in the EU drops their tax rate, well, you have a haven for businesses to want to go to that particular country because they get a better tax rate. You have a bunch of countries that are based in Ireland because they can get a fucking awesome tax rate in Ireland. Like I suspect the news is somewhat of a similar way, where you have certain people who own the media in this case. There's certain things that they don't want to talk about, so they don't necessarily talk about those things, and they inundate people with nonsense. I was downstairs with my mom the other day. My wife and I are here because we're leaving. We're going to go traveling for the next few months. We didn't want to get rent. We didn't want to get a lease. And the news is on, and I'm like, this is what comes on for news? It's like, this person got shot. This person got stabbed. A bear was running through. Apparently a bear got loose and was running through the streets. And that's the news. Like, that's the 30-minute block of news. And I'm like, you can't be kidding me that this is what they give people for news. I was like, who's running in the election coming up today? And my mom knew. But I would wager that the majority of the people, if I threw a rock, would know. There's there's main news, like the stuff that takes place. Who are your political leaders who are in Congress? What are the things that those people are voting on? What about your local governments? Like those things, which you would think would be news in a rational society, they're not. Instead, you get a bear was running through the streets of Richmond. And that, for the most part, is the main news story of the day. It's amazing.
Look on the bright side. If they did it right, we wouldn't have to.
That's true. That's true. That's true. We get a job because they fuck up so bad.
I spend so much of my time on my, probably 50% of my videos are actually just commenting on how bad the media is, because I really want to highlight it. I want to show people this is how propaganda works. This is how they are changing your minds. This is how they're manufacturing consent. Yeah. I want to show people. I want to show the world it. I want to, if I can get away. I remember when I set up my channel, I had no ideas of changing the world, or actually, of doing this full time or making it my job. I was just fucking angry. That's all it was.
Same here.
When I did the video, when I did the video, it was like, right, okay, I'm going to do this video on Donald Trump because he's took the piss out of our NHS and lied 7 times. That was my first video. I was angry. I thought if one person from America or around the world sees that video and thinks, right, okay, now I understand, that's it, job done.
Yeah.
And that's how it started. That's how my channel started, because the media weren't even talking about that tweet with Trump and the NHS. They weren't even calling out on how badly he lied 6 times in one tweet.
You misunderstand American media. The NHS.
No, I don't. Not anymore.
Fair enough. But the NHS, from the standpoint of America, is socialized medicine. Now, the media will never make this argument or make this case, at least not in a real way, that Americans have, like 30-something from the standpoint of ranking in healthcare. And yet the president of the United States was shit on the #1 healthcare system on the planet. That is an amazing thing, but the media would not bring that up because the media has an American perspective, and that American perspective has a we're #1, we're the best, we're exceptional, everybody else get the fuck out the way, that type of stuff. So, like, that's how our media is. So I give you another example. And one of my friends, best friend, a Hillary supporter. And he comes over one day, and the only thing he could talk about is Trump and Russia. And as we're talking, I realized that there's certain basic information and details he doesn't know. Like, so the Saudi Arabia thing, that we were working with terrorists in that part of the world, in the Middle East. He didn't know that. He didn't know that Saudi Arabia was murdering Yemenis. He didn't know. And what I realized was he didn't know because he watches CNN, MSNBC, and for the most part, what they talk about is rah, America's #1, America's great, Democrats are great, Republicans suck. And so you don't get the finer details of what's taking place in the world.
Of course,
he had a very limited view.
Can you imagine somebody like Ben Shapiro coming on my show for an interview and him saying, who's going to pay for this Medicare for all? It's like, are you kidding me? You can't afford something that's cheaper? What's the matter with you? That's
4 times cheaper, by the way.
It's
4 times cheaper.
You're paying twice as much as us for something that's ranked. What is it now? 58? Thought it was 58. I think it might have gone up a little bit, but it's ranked well below where we are. We're not ranked as high in our health service in the world now as we were because of the austerity cuts that the Tories have put in over the last 8 years. Yeah. I think we were second, and we slipped down to about 8th now. But US, you're not even close, and you pay more than twice that we do, and you've got, what is it, 42 million uninsured? Yeah, everybody in the UK is insured,
and it's getting worse. Everybody. And that same president who was talking about that did put through measures to make more people uninsured. Think about that. You're in a country where you're literally trying to push through healthcare to weaken the already tepid healthcare coverage that you already have. I find that to be amazing. Like, and people support that. Let me ask you this, and this is getting into, and I'll let this be because this one is going a little bit long, but I like talking to you. So
you should have said that at the beginning. We won't keep this very long.
Oh, right. right. This is going to be long. 3 hours later. I get joked on that all the time. My wife jokes me on my perception of time and my estimation of how long things are going to take. It's like I would have this I don't know if it's because I have this overly inflated sense of how fast I can do something. I don't know what it is, but it takes place that way. The NHS under Theresa May, you guys have been on a privatizing spree, and I've done videos where I begged Brits not to let the Tories rip apart your healthcare system, because that seems like what they're trying to do and privatizing a lot of stuff. There were situations where people were dying in ambulances because they didn't have the resources necessary to get to the hospital. There were situations where the doctors themselves came out saying, we need more resources to make this work. What the hell is going on with the NHS in Britain? And two things, two parts of that question. Can you explain the British system for healthcare? From my understanding, you guys have private and health kind of working side by side. I've been to one of the clinics in Britain, and it was a private clinic. But for what I understand, you guys have public and private hospitals. Yeah. And can you explain how doctors are organized in the British system?
You go to your doctor, wherever that be. Wherever you go, you can obviously see a doctor, although they are massively overworked now. There are way too many people per doctor in this country. We just haven't got enough. And I actually read a story yesterday how the government are actually stopping doctors and nurses coming in. They're not giving them visas.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. It was in, I think it was in The Guardian yesterday.
No,
I read it last night.
Sometimes I say, are you serious? Because I'm shocked by the whole thing. It's somewhat of a figure of speech. My bad. Yeah, my bad. But that's mind blowing. You guys have a shortage of doctors, and they're stopping doctors from coming into the country.
Yeah, I mean, if we didn't have migrants coming into the country from the EU and elsewhere, we wouldn't have an NHS now. The NHS is a massive percentage of NHS workers actually come from other countries to work in our NHS. It's a huge percentage. I can't tell you off the top of my head. I could guess, but it's going to be high. And now they're stopping others coming in. Now, you've got to understand why the Tories would do this. Why would the Tories have a series of austerity cuts against the health service that I can't stress enough how much the UK people take pride in our National Health Service. It's the number one thing that we've had it since the 40s. We were one of the first countries to adopt a single payer system, and we are extremely proud of it. And seeing the Tories dismantle it over the last almost decade like they have, it's borderline criminal. And the only reason they're doing it is to just say, see, the NHS doesn't work. We need to go to a private system. That's what why they are intentionally. It's doing what Trump is doing right now in America. He's doing the same thing. He's doing the same thing with industries. He's well, not industries, but he's doing the same thing with departments within, for instance, the EPA. He's putting people into the heads of departments who have spent their whole careers trying to destroy the very department that they are now at the head of. And they're doing the same thing with the NHS over here. It's not
during the Olympics. You guys did a tribute to the NHS, and that was one of those things. It was like, holy shit, they really love their healthcare system. I was like, wow.
Why wouldn't you, Jamal?
But that's kind of your point. I think that's your point. Like, you guys take pride in the fact that you guys have a national healthcare system, and that whether you're poor, rich, broke, cripple, crazy, somewhere in between, you can get healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple system, really, and it's fair as well. And the only reason why rich people don't say it's not fair is because of capitalism and what they have become accustomed to with capitalism and getting around taxation laws. Because I can't remember this. This might be wrong, so don't quote me on it. Our NHS is basically funded in large part by something called national insurance deductions. I think that's the case anyway. Mm-hmm. And it's roughly, it works out probably, I think, about 8 or 10% of your salary. That's if you have to earn over a certain amount of money before you start paying it. And no matter what your salary is, that pretty much percentage stays the same. Now, that's fair.
Oh, they don't like it. They don't like it because it takes a larger percentage of their salaries.
If for somebody in America, for instance, who's earning, say, $2,000 a month, that's a higher than average wage, or maybe about average wage in America. What sort of, this is, say it's a person who's making $48,000 a year. What sort of premium would he be having to pay a private insurance company
in America?
for his whole family. So he's married with two kids.
Seriously, that may take half of that paycheck, if not more. And to put it in perspective, do you remember the strikes in West Virginia? Part of those strikes were started because they had to pay such a large share of their money towards healthcare. It is painful. If you have like a family of 4, you can be paying $700 for healthcare. Healthcare rates under Obamacare, the thing that was supposed to solve healthcare, was going up by like 50% in some of these states. Healthcare in this country is utterly painful. When I was at work, I used to pay around $200 of my income for healthcare, and that's good. My wife paying about $200. Again, relatively good. But you're talking about together, we're paying $400 as a family for healthcare. That's not even without kids. Like it's hard to get that across. And God forbid you lose your job and then you end up on something called Cobra, which you're paying like $400, $500 a month for. Mind you, you've just lost your job.
Yeah.
So look, they are trying to destroy healthcare in the same way that right wingers are trying to destroy the post office in the United States, using policy and everything else to be able to point to it and see, we told you it didn't work. Yeah. A private option would be a better option. In the United States, the difference is you don't really have anybody standing up for that, saying you guys are bogus and you guys are trying to destroy this. Whereas in the UK, at the very least, you have people trying to fight for it.
Yeah, we're indoctrinated with the NHS. That's why. I mean, we've had it so long. We know how wonderful it is, and we hear of our American cousins. And for instance, I was in America in 2008, experienced a tragedy while I was over there. It was one of the hardest times of my life, and I met 2 people who became probably my closest friends right now. I love them to bits. They were the nicest, kindest, most awesome people I had ever met. And they didn't know me from Adam. They didn't know who I was. They are awesome. And one of them,
Bill and Hillary Clinton.
One of them actually had cancer.
Cancer. I'm sorry. God damn it.
He was paying for insurance, or his insurance was paid for through his job, but it didn't cover whatever cancer he had. I think it was spleen, which is quite bad. And he had to go on GoFundMe to pay for his care.
Think about that. Your government, and look, I'm saying this from personal experience. I had a medical issue when I was 17, and my mom working, barely making ends meet. Like she used to make. My mom, I think, was making around $7 an hour when she first started working, and she, for the most part, stayed with the same company working for the state. Ended up making like $13 an hour, which is nothing. Like talking about, and had to raise a kid on this, paying out health insurance and all this other stuff. And when I got sick, you really got to see how horrible the system was. She had to pay for all of these copays, which means that copays, and if you have multiple copays, like think of it as you go into the hospital every other month. Think of it, you end up in the hospital. All of that money is coming out. You have doctors in the United States. A doctor could come into your room, take your blood pressure, leave, and you get a bill for $100 or something. It's like, what the fuck? The hospital charges you. Every doctor who you see, for the most part in that hospital, has like a separate charge associated with it. You get hit with charges out the ass. Now, if you're lucky, you may have Medicare, which pays 80%, which means if you had a hospital bill for $100,000, which is easy to get, seeing.
Cool. You've only got a $20,000 bill. That's nothing, Jamal. What are you complaining about? $20,000? That's nothing. You should be able to pull that out your back pocket.
My hospital bills has been over $1 million, easy. Now, I'm just talking about the amount of money that's been charged. Medicare helps pay for part of it, but then you have this thing where you end up with this donut hole. Where, look, I'm just saying, I understand what you mean when you say this. Like it's fucking savage, and to have people like Romney and Trump and Republicans and even Democrats. Do you know that Democratic Party has been out there not for single payer? There are 2 Democrats in Virginia.
Your Democratic Party is our Conservative Party.
They are. I keep saying that they are.
If you look at what the Democrats stand for, they stand for big business, they stand for big oil, they stand for fracking, they stand for lower taxes on the rich, and they're pro-choice and they are okay with gay people. That's basically their platform.
That's it.
That is the Conservatives in this country.
And that's what I was about to say. And they talk like the Conservatives in your country. But Democrats, the people in this country, don't know that. Like, unless you watch British politics. Like, if you watch British politics and you're a Democrat, you'd be like, I don't see what they're complaining about. That's what you would say. I don't see their issue. I don't see what they're complaining about, because for all intents and purposes, the conservatives in that party is the Democrats in this party. And the fact is, the Tories are perfectly okay with dismantling those public institutions that you guys have.
Where are you on Dem Enter, Dem Exit, Jamal?
I am Dem Exit. I think Democratic Party is fucking horrid. Now, that being said, I do say support the person who represents your interests.
Yeah, it's the same as me. Support the policy, not the party.
Yeah, because you could have a situation with somebody, for instance, I met people who were running, using the husk of the Democratic Party to run because they didn't think they could otherwise run. Now, those people, I would say, are probably not going to get elected. And the Democratic Party has been trying to push those people out of the race. And despite trying to push those people out of the race, those people still consider themselves Democrats. I think that is one of the saddest features. Imagine for the moment that you are an abuse counselor and the woman or the guy is telling you how bad they beat you and hit you and that he had sex with the maid and that he was an alcoholic. And it's like, but you're staying. Well, he said he loves me. He has a good heart. He used to be nice to me.
Nails it. That nails it. I'm on the side of, listen, I think if you're a Democrat in a closed primary, I think it makes sense to register Democrat, because if you don't, you can't vote. For instance, New York, I think, is a closed primary, isn't it?
It is. But if you think about this shit,
so unless you're in New York
9 months prior, you wouldn't be able to vote in the primaries. Think about that shit. Yeah. They're making. So many people didn't even know who was running in the primaries at the time when the New York thing came out. And to add, insult to injury on this, they got rid of 200,000 people off of the rolls in Brooklyn and New York, broke federal and state law. And the consequence to that was a slap on the wrist that they wouldn't do it again. I mean, it's aggravating. It's utterly aggravating. And yet I have to listen to, well, I don't have to, but you would see people who are in the Democratic Party who call themselves lefties complaining and whining and crying about how the Democratic Party is hitting them and the Democratic Party is not being fair and they're not treating us right and they're hurting us in all of these elections throughout the country. And yet they still consider themselves Democrats, not getting the hint that their party is just not that into them. The party's not
they're just not. I mean, they
6 months. I'm sorry. Thank you for it.
The point I was going to make about New York was if you weren't a registered Democrat in New York, you couldn't vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I may have just butchered her name, but
no, you're right. I butchered her earlier, so you're right.
She's basically a progressive wet dream. Is what, if you look at her policies, she's just amazing. And so I understand people being in the party when you're in a closed primary, but.
No, I like your phrasing. It's just she's very attractive and call it a progressive wet dream.
Oh, I didn't mean it. You're
fine. That's me. That's me. That's not you. That's me. That's me.
Down, boy. Down.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. That's my bad.
Yeah, so we understand being in the Democrat, registering as a Democrat in states that have a closed primary. But if you've got an open primary in your state, fucking get the hell out of there, because they are not. Like you say, they are not that into you. They are not on your side, and they are the reason America is screwed, not the Republicans. They are the problem. They're the ones who pushed the Republicans further and further right, expecting them to come closer with this whole Tony Blair, we want to reach out to them. Yeah, you reach out to a Republican, he's going to go, fuck you, I'm going further over there to the right. That's what he's going to do, and that's exactly what's happened. And that's why you've ended up with a Republican Party now that I'm doing a video at the moment, Jamal, and I've looked at fascism. It's fascist is what it is. If you look down all the points, all the warning signs of a fascist government and what fascist governments do before they come fully blown, fascist, what happens is they do 14 things, and America ticks every single box now. Every box. All it takes now for America to flip the switch to over to a fully blown fascist empire, in my opinion, is a cataclysmic event. Because then all of a sudden, reasoning and thinking goes out the window. Everybody, you remember the support George Bush got after 9/11 and what happened after that? People lose their fucking minds.
I would argue that we're already there. And the reason
it is a fascist state now. It's just not fully blown Holocaust level fascist. But
well, it's not fascist. I mean, I think it's soft fascism. And the reason, and let me nail my terms. This coordination between state and this coordination between private enterprise with this kind of lockdown on the citizenry itself, this undermining of democracy itself in order to kind of put their agenda through. I don't see how that's not what we already have. I mean, think about what took place. The Democratic Party had made the choice on who it wanted as a candidate. And all the way back from the standpoint where Obama made that deal with Clinton, where I would make you Secretary of State if you get behind me and support me. And that's what happened. And then the moment that 4 years was up, she leaves in order to prepare for the presidential campaign. The Democratic Party literally organizes itself around making sure she's the candidate. And Deborah Wallace-Michels literally hands over the keys. If you notice, if you look back at some of the things that Hillary Clinton was saying, she acted as if everybody owed her their vote, because from her standpoint,
my turn.
They did. Yeah, because from her standpoint, they did. And so, it's like you have this thing where they're literally shafting one of the people who are running in the race, literally hitting them in the knees with the entire party, its apparatus itself, making a choice on who it wants.
And he's still Peter.
And she still lost. She still lost. She utterly still lost. I agree with you on this, man. I am greatly concerned about this.
I'm very concerned, Jamal, because one cataclysmic event, one world event, one false flag, it could all
that's all
go.
it's needed.
It's all it needs, and it will go full-blown fascist. It's there, like you say, it is there already. It ticks all the boxes. You look at them now, whipping. They're telling babies at the border coming in with immigrants. They're telling kids, we're just going to take away and wash them, and they never see the parents again.
But they were doing it before. I mean, they were putting kids in cages prior.
This isn't just Trump.
Yeah, it was prior to Trump. Like, this is kind of what I mean when I said this kind of soft fact. Obama sings Amazing Grace really well, so they give him a pass on this. And so they're like, oh, he's so competent, he's so great. And they're acting as if just because Trump is racist, that him being racist somehow is makes it worse, that you're kicking kids out of the country or, throwing people in cages and whatnot. I'm sorry, whether you're racist doing it or whether you're not racist doing it, you're still doing it. I'll give you another example. The bombings and stuff. When the National Defense Authorization Act that was passed under Obama, I don't know, this may be getting in details, but essentially allows military to be held on United States soil. Now, that's mind-blowing. It also allows Americans to be locked in black sites.
Yep.
Now, that's under Obama. That wasn't Trump. The Orwellian thing, the Ministry of Truth that they passed under Obama just before he left, allowing the public and the press and the media to essentially lie to the public to create their narrative of events. All of that was under Obama.
Oh, yeah. Obama was the one who signed a $38 billion deal with Israel, over the next 10 years. Obama was the one who prosecuted more whistleblowers and journalists than all the other administrations combined. This is not just Trump. And I remember, listen, I get it. If there's people out there who love Obama and think the sun shines out of his ass, I get it. I used to be there with you. I was oblivious the same as you are.
Same here.
Now, Jamal, it's you, and it's the job of people like you and I who have an independent platform to fight this and get the word out and teach people, listen, we're living in an Orwellian nightmare right now. There is no denying it. If you look, did you see the Empire Files video that they did about John Oliver's show on Venezuela?
I did.
My God, that was propaganda of and the thing is, John Oliver is one of the better guys. I don't think that John Oliver went into that and intentionally lied about anything. No, I think his researchers didn't intentionally lie about things. I don't think that was intentional propaganda. Yeah, but I guarantee you this, there were people at HBO who knew that was wrong. And they would have sat back and said, no, let it happen. And I'm so glad that I've forgotten the guy's name from Empire Files. And I do have to verify that everything he said was true, because he did leave a lot of sources out in that video that I don't like seeing. But that is what he was talking about, was the way I saw the situation in Venezuela. That's what Venezuela is. And what I saw with the John Oliver, I remember throwing stuff at my computer screen, watching that segment that he did. It's like, how can somebody who's born 25 miles away from where I was born be so fucking up the establishment's arse in America? It's like, dude, you come from the West Midlands. You know, you've got the same sort of values as me. But then I started thinking, he's not done this on purpose, I don't think.
I don't think
he's
he
one of
did
the
this
best
on purpose.
guys.
I mean, there's some people. I mean, one of the strongest things about propaganda is that many of the people who are doing it don't know they're doing it. I mean,
Rachel Maddow does.
Yeah, Rachel Maddow does.
Jake Tapper does.
I don't believe
Chris
Rachel
Hayes
Maddow
does.
is doing this in the closet at all. Rachel Maddow knows what the hell she's doing.
Yeah.
She knows exactly what she's doing. There's no fucking way. I heard Rachel Maddow accelerated Clinton. I think about the Clinton Foundation. Hillary Clinton blew her off, and Rachel Maddow said, "Okay, thank you very much." I've heard Rachel Maddow mention drones and all this other stuff. She knows the stuff. She knows it. Like the flying killer robots and all this other stuff. Rachel Maddow knows the stuff. Rachel Maddow focuses on very specific things for the standpoint of democratic politics. That's
and she also knows. She also knows that the minute she costs her corporate masters a penny, she's fired.
She's done.
She knows that. She's an intelligent woman, but that just shows you how money just affects people. And I mean, you look at Rachel Maddow; she's probably a wonderful person with a loving.
Is it money or political affiliation?
I think it's power.
And let me explain what I mean by this. When Donna Brazile comes out, and Donna Brazile said they cheated, they rigged it. Keith Olbermann comes out and says Donna Brazile has just lost her job. Now, he wasn't shocked by the cheating or anything else. His thing was she's just lost her job. Keith Olbermann used to work for MSNBC, meaning Keith Olbermann was part of the Democratic establishment when he was working for MSNBC. His take on this was based on job employment. Is it possible that Rachel Maddow is working for her corporate overlords at MSNBC with a very specific agenda for the Democratic Party? And she knows that if she deviates from that agenda associated with the Democratic Party, her ass will be on the street, just like Ed Schultz.
Yeah.
It's not just cash. I'm making a point that it's to some degree political affiliation.
Yeah, I think I would say it's power. Obviously having the #1 news show must be a huge driving factor there. Money, obviously, and it's probably all an amalgamation of all these things. But one thing's for sure, she's a sellout, and there are so many shows that I have seen of hers that I literally could do a 3-hour video just taking a 10 segment and whipping it. I did write one article. I talked to you about I used to be an internet marketer, so I knew a lot of people who were in these internet market groups. I knew one of the guys who ran a pro-Bernie group. It was a large pro-Bernie group. There were over 100,000 people. And Maddow's segment on it outed him as one of these trolls. And it's this is a guy from, I think he was from Virginia, actually. He might have been Virginia or West Virginia. But it's like, this is a socialist from West Virginia. I knew him personally. I spoke to him. I've talked to him on chats like this. It's like, what is the matter? You are intentionally getting this wrong. You cannot be a reporter and get it that wrong. You must.
She's not a reporter.
But that's not her getting it wrong. That's her researchers getting it wrong, and her just being the mouthpiece, knowing that it's wrong.
Well, it's worse. There's another guy. Where she used as a source talking about the Bernie groups were being invaded by communists or you know what I mean, by Russia, by the Ruskies. The Ruskies are invading the groups. And the person she used for it wasn't even in charge of the group. He wasn't even head of the group. Like I had a conversation with the people who actually ran the group. And they said that guy, we knew him, but he wasn't owner of the group, nor were we inundated with Russians.
And so the other thing that she never even mentioned I think she did she did one show on the Facebook groups electing Trump, and then she did one show on the Facebook groups being infiltrated by Russians who were pro Bernie Sanders.
Ruskies.
But the thing is, like I said, I knew many people who had, in some cases, one guy had 2,000 bot accounts, 2,000 social media accounts that were all registered in 100 Facebook groups, just putting out their information, their clickbait articles. Some of them were false, some of them were good, and it depends on how high bar your moral bar is, as to whether you go down to the level of Pizzagate or you say, right, I'm going to be factual and just try and get people on the page, knowing that I'm going to get less people on that page than the page on Pizzagate. So I know people who pushed that bullshit. It wasn't propaganda. They weren't doing the bidding of the Russians. They weren't trying to topple the US democracy or anything like that. They were trying to make money.
Yeah.
That's it. I know these people. So I knew the 2 segments that she did on these Facebook groups, and specifically mentioned Facebook groups, that I knew were very profitable for my friends. Very profitable.
You know what's wild about that? The idea, even I had this infuriating text back and forth with a good friend of mine, full-throated, unabashed Hillary supporter. I hadn't seen him in like years, and it shocked the shit out of me when the Russia stuff was the only thing that he could talk about. Shocked the shit out of me, like I damn near fell out of my chair. And then you kind of just make the point, prove it. What do you have to prove? And there's nothing. It's like, well, this guy said this, and this other guy said this, and yeah, I get that. I get it. Prove it. I mean, it's like this has been going on for like 2 years. The NSA, the CIA, these alphabet soups have been literally keeping track of all of the communications that have been taking place. They would have it if they had it. You know what I mean? Like it was one of those things that was taking place. And there's something ridiculous about the conversation of the United States saying Russia put Facebook and Twitter ads, half of which took place after half of which took after the election, and that toppled American democracy. Do you know how stupid that sounds?
You know, I put all this in my book, mate. It's, you know, I went through it A to Z on this Russiagate nonsense. And to be honest, I don't even pay much attention to it anymore because you know, I know what's going on, and I know everybody else talks about it, and I know my viewership is all Russiaed out. You know, they want to talk about Yemen. They want to talk about Gaza. They want me to talk about, you know, a living wage. They want me to talk about homelessness and poverty. They want to talk about all these things that the news should be. That's what the news should talk about. They shouldn't talk about some cockamamie. The thing is,
it's a conspiracy theory. I mean, that's literally what it is.
They smeared Jimmy Dore as a conspiracy theory, yet they spent the last 2 years chasing the biggest conspiracy theory since maybe ever.
I did that article because it you know, CNN was looking for this way of trying to be what they consider to be balanced, and their balance was, here are all these flaming right-winger racist Nazis on one side, and here's Jimmy Dore pushing conspiracy theory. That's all they had. And you're like, what was the conspiracy theory that Jimmy Dore was pushing?
You don't understand. You don't understand. Asking questions and asking for proof, that's conspiracy theory now, Jamal. You must understand that. You're in Putin's pocket.
You know, right, somebody's like, you're a Putin puppet and all this other stuff. It's like, for asking questions, like somebody saying, hey, it doesn't seem like you guys have evidence for the Syrian chemical strikes. What are you using to prove that it took place? Oh, that guy's a conspiracy theorist because that guy questioned the intelligence services. Yes, I'm questioning the intelligence services. You should too. But to them, they don't require proof. They're stenographers, and the media just repeats. And you know, the sad part about it is, the friend of mine, he's like, oh, that's right, you don't trust the intelligence services. And it's like, but you understand that you should be skeptical of power, and you should be skeptical of these services. These guys lie a lot, and you don't have any evidence. Like it's almost as if they've completely forgotten weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That by itself should be enough for you to say, yes, I question what they consider to be quote unquote intelligence, especially when you're positioning me against another country. They lost that. And I tried to make the point to them that your paradigm of the world needs this, because you don't necessarily understand how your person you voted for lost a reality show host. And beyond that, you don't quite like Trump. And so you're looking for anything that you can find to hit him with. Fair enough. But let's be honest and acknowledge that you don't have what you think you have in order to try to make that case. You can't make that case stick.
I've had emails from people, Jamal, who have said, they said to me that I'm Putin's puppet and they can't wait till MI6 catch up to me. And the reason they said that was because I started a petition to stop the UK funding the White Helmets until there was a review of, you know, their actions in Syria and whose side they're actually on. I got called a Putin puppet and, you know, saying they can't wait for MI6 to catch up to me just because I started a petition.
Are you serious?
Yeah. The petition wasn't the White Helmets are funded by this and they're with the jihadists. It's like, no, serious questions have to be asked of these people before we give them any more public money.
Agreed. I agree with that. And, you know, Donald Trump stopped funding them, by the way. After that last chemical strike, he stopped funding them. He cut funding overtly to the White Helmets. And I strongly suspect, I've hypothesized that part of the reason he did it is because I don't think he wants to be fucking around in Syria. I suspect he realizes that this puts him in this kind of weird opposition with Russia.
Yeah.
It could lead to a war. And unfortunately, I suspect he wants to focus his energies on Iran. I
suspect that he was very angry because I think he realized he was manipulated into doing something because they manipulated him with pictures of dead children, and there was Ivanka saying, look at the children, and that's why he said, yeah, okay, we'll bomb. Is that correct? That's the way it happened, wasn't it?
That's what I think. Yeah, I think because look, there's a political thing in this country where we don't do well making a disassociation between something bad happening and us needing to do something about it. So it's like there's something takes place in the world and immediately we need to punch somebody in the nose. Nobody asks the question of A, did it take place? B, is it legal? C, what are the consequences for the actions that you're taking? Those things don't matter. It boils down to you need to punch somebody in the nose. America, for the most part, considered to be drawing this red line. In a political thing, Donald Trump chastised Obama for not necessarily being more strong. So the moment that something like this happens, he's not going to go against the political will. The political will being something took place in the world. You need to do something. If he doesn't, the first thing they're going to say is, oh my God, he's a Putin puppet because he doesn't want to strike Syria because of Russia, all this stuff. It's easier to go along with the political will. It's the same thing with Sanders. When Sanders comes out and he's attacking Assad and he's attacking Russia and all this other stuff, he eventually gets around to what he wants to talk about, but he almost has to start off going along with the political will because it's easier to go with the current. I suspect that was the same thing with Trump. He comes out and then he immediately cuts funding to the White Helmets immediately after he does a strike. Mathis comes out, says, we're still looking for evidence of chemical weapons being used, let alone that the Syrian government was responsible. And the chemical strike prior, when Mathis was asked, Mathis said, we have no evidence that the Syrian government was responsible. This is going back to the strike before last.
And the 2012 one, the United Nations have said that that was most likely a false flag by the rebels. The United Nations have said that.
Yeah. So it's like in one situation after the next, the media itself, for whatever reason, doesn't seem to get the news from the United Nations, nor do they get the news from Mattis saying that, nor do they get Tulsi Gabbard questioning him about this, nor do they get this thing that Mattis is talking about, we don't have any evidence for this. They don't get any of that. All of that's off the table. The only thing they talk about is Obama did a red line. There was a chemical strike. The United States has to respond. And I remember, you know, in this country, they attacked Donald Trump. I can't stand the guy. But it's almost because there's so much hatred, it's like, I don't necessarily want to end with those voices because those voices were so hypocritical from a standpoint of the previous administration. So it's like, so often Trump would do something good, they completely ignored the thing that he did good. But they also completely ignored the things that Obama was doing that was horrendous. And so it's like, how on earth are you spending the entirety of the time on CNN attacking Donald Trump, but you gave Obama, for the most part, a pass? And they don't ask real things. Like I give an example. When Brian Williams, after Donald Trump launched that missile into Syria, Brian Williams has this famous video. He was like,
of my weapons.
Yeah, he's becoming poetic as Donald Trump illegally fires a missile into a country that ends up killing a guy. I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Is it legal? Is it legal? That would have been my first question. Is it legal for the president to do this? Are we in this country under threat? Even if what you say is true, are we in this country under threat? Has there been an investigation? And how is the president firing a missile into a country without an investigation? These are basic questions that were never asked, that nobody cared about. I am blinded by the beauty of our missiles.
That actually, when I heard him say that, that actually made me physical. It was almost, it made me gag. I was almost physically sick by it, by how somebody who is just a cheerleader for death. That's all it is. It's a cheerleader for death. And I've always said, I've learned over the years, as I say, I've learned over the years, especially over the last 2 years, when it comes to war and anything to do with the Middle East, you might as well just ignore everything America says, because you can guarantee it's going to be either flat out false or skewed in one way that won't actually give you the facts. I've almost literally discounted America for everything. The same as, if you want to find out what Russia's doing in the world, don't go to RT. Right. If you want to find out what BBC, what the British are doing over in Syria or Afghanistan, you know what? Your BBC is probably not your best option there. No, but when it comes to other stuff, they are really good at it. Really good at what they do. And CNN and MSNBC, they're really good at what they do. It's just what they do is fucking useless.
But it depends on what they're analyzed. Like I always say, I think RT is great when it's criticizing American imperialism, because America is an imperialist nation. So I can look at it. But if RT is talking about something Russia is doing, it's usually rubbish. Like it depends on the lens of the show. And there is no such thing as objectivity. So you end up with these various perspectives that you use depending upon what you're trying to analyze, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's there's like a different microscope to analyze different things.
I know what you mean. There was a show I watched, I think it was last year, called Icarus. I don't know whether you've seen it on Netflix. And it was a cyclist. It was an amateur cyclist who wanted to see how far actually pumping his body full of drugs would make him competitive in a race. So what he wanted to do was he wanted to do a documentary on him taking these drugs and see what effect it had and how his performance would. And he was documenting it all.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
And he couldn't find a guy in America to actually give him the drugs. No doctors would actually prescribe him the program. So eventually, there was a guy in Russia who said, yeah, I'll do it. No problem. And they started chatting and what have you. This guy in Russia ended up being the guy who oversaw the whole program in Sochi in the state-run Olympic doping. It's all on camera.
Are you serious?
Watch Icarus. It's brilliant because it starts out, I'm going to try and dope and get away with it. And it ends up being this whole shit is in witness protection in America at the moment because the Russians want to kill him. That's what it's a brilliant documentary. And it starts out, all he wants to do is say, I wonder how faster I could go using some drugs. I wonder if there's a doctor who can do that and I can get round the anti-doping system. No doctors in America would do it. Somebody put him in touch with this Russian guy. I've forgotten his name. This Russian guy, honestly, Jamal, you'll love him. He's brilliant.
I'm going to have to check that out. That is hilarious.
The reason he was head of the doping program was because he had actually, years before, I can't remember the exact story, I won't give it away, but there was some sort of conflict and he was in jail. And the reason he was released from jail was because he could do the job of overseeing the doping program better than anybody else. And that's why they released him. So he was basically forced into doing this. But you go to RT and ask them, does IT have a state-sponsored doping? Russians never, ever.
We would never.
Propaganda. The Western.
Accent, but I can't get the Russian accent.
There's a whole video, the whole documentary on tape of this happening, him showing the hole in the, where they pass the drugs through in Sochi to get around the doping system with the it's a brilliant documentary. It's all on tape.
I'm going to have to check that out. I'm going to have to check that out.
It was fantastic.
I don't know if you've seen this one. This was this goes back. I think this was before the Russian thing, and this was it was the Chinese and the women divers, and the women, they were like massive, these hulking women, and it was like, we've taken no drugs. It's like this deep voice. We've taken no drugs.
There was some
racist by saying it, and it's like, just. And they're like winning everything. They're like, 100 pounds heavier or some ridiculous amount. I'm big, way hyperbolic, but they're like massive women who, if you know, they're trying to convince you that they're not on anything. It's like, okay, fair enough, whatever.
Yeah, it was the same with the Chinese. There was some Chinese middle distance runners. Ji Wang, I think, was the one, and they were knocking like 15, 20 seconds off. They were racing as fast as the men. It's like, we're not taking drugs.
We're not taking drugs. We're not taking drugs at all.
This is how messed up athletics is. One of those, in fact, it might be 2 or 3 of those women who obviously was a doper, is in the Athletics Hall of Fame. I think there's 2 of them.
They didn't go back and snatch her ass out of the because they couldn't prove it. They couldn't prove it.
Taken drugs because the testing wasn't available then.
Wow. And what's his name at this point is a pariah, the cyclist. He had the most
Armstrong.
Yeah, Armstrong. He had the most intricate doping program I've ever seen in my life. Like, he had gotten to the point where they would stop, get on the bus, have a blood transfusion, get back on
in the middle of the night, like, 4 o'clock in some car park in Romania.
Yeah, it was like it was like, you're like, wow, like that man, you're talking about somebody wanted it, and people were like, well, he had cancer, and maybe the cancer just made him much more, resistant to pain. No, he was fucking doping like nobody's business. Doping, talking about cancer made him stronger, more resilient. It might have. But I would imagine the blood transfusions also helped magnificently.
That guy, if all he did was dope, you know what? I'd forgive him, because everybody was back then. There wasn't there were 10% of cyclists that weren't taking EPO back then. The problem I have with him is when people called him out on it, he sued them and he ruined people's lives who were telling the truth.
Yes,
and that is what I've got against Lance Armstrong. And to be fair to the guy, I've seen interviews with him. I've seen interviews with him on. There was one he did with Joe Rogan, which was excellent. And obviously there was the Oprah thing. And to be fair to him, he understands that there are people that are never going to forgive him for what he did to other people, and he understands that. And in a way, even though I would never forgive him, I do sort of respect the fact that he's come out and said, "Yeah, okay, I did this thing. It was wrong, but everybody else was doing it. However, I'm not going to make any excuses. What I did was absolutely terrible." Maybe that was the reason.
Let me say, Balthazar is not Gordon, is Comrade Agent Sylar. Comrade Agent Sylar is one of the people who wrote my channel. Also, apparently, Progressive Voice called me the prompter in the Jimmy.
The prompter? But is that your superhero name?
I don't know what that means. Now, to be fair,
I'll get you a cape with a P on it.
I know. Oh God, that's hilarious. But now, to be fair to Progressive Voice, I was somewhat of a dick to him. He sent me a request to be on the show, and I don't think I responded, or if I did respond, I didn't respond well.
And then he knows what he's talking about. He really does know what he's talking about.
I think he's joking me. I mean, I think he dislikes me at this point. I did a hit video on him. He said this video was so uncool or something to that effect. He's 16. Whatever. I guess he's criticizing the video with Dora. He's joking me. That's fine. Children joke all the time, so it's fine. Dude, I really appreciate this. Thank you for coming on, talking about the British thing. And I know our conversation went well beyond the Brit thing. Just two blokes having a conversation about all sorts of shit.
Shooting the shit.
So thank you very much for coming on to the show.
Thank you for inviting me on.
Gordan Dimmack, ladies and gentlemen, Gordan Dimmack has his own channel. I'm going to put his channel at the bottom. There have been a few people who said this guy is cool as hell. I love this guy. So you can find this guy on Gordan Dimmack's channel on YouTube.
Thanks, Jamal. Peace
Thanks,
out,
man. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. Of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone.